billion, ninth match, and strike rate of about 130. So a good start in terms of numbers, in terms of how quickly he bats, how quickly he scores in international cricket.
Slippers is in position. Let's see what happens. Is in position. Yeah, that's good cricket. Once again to the other end. Good cross.
What is a Muslim? Muslim is a person who follows the commands of God and dedicates their life to live by the guidelines laid by God by reading the Quran. Muslims are taught to be at peace. Peace within our community, as we are taught to love and respect one another and to love nature, to respect and love animals. Peace within ourselves. By following the commandments of God, God gives us peace in our hearts. What does a Muslim look like? Muslims come in all shapes and sizes, different ages and ethnic origins, from different countries speaking different languages, from different cultures and backgrounds. They are normal human beings. Muslims all believe that God is one. God has no partners and has no sons. There are no other gods beside God. They believe in the Quranic message, which was delivered through Prophet Muhammad. Please subscribe, like, and peace.
Yes, it was. I've been working at Kazi Publications for about 15 years. This is the oldest Muslim publisher in America. They were established in 1972 in Chicago. And so as a writer, I've written about 20 books, and I've translated maybe 25 more about Islam and Irfan and Tasawwuf and Sufism and so forth. So in all cases, I came across Quranic verses, and I would always look to see how other people had translated these verses. And in many cases, I was very disappointed because they used the Arabic words in the English translation. So I thought, well, if somebody doesn't know the Arabic or they're not Muslim, they're not going to be able to understand this translation. And then also there's a particular word, kafir, which is usually translated as infidel or disbeliever or unbeliever. Well, I realized, based on my knowledge of classical Arabic grammar that I studied at Tehran University and then with a private teacher, that the word originally, the most important meaning of it is to be ungrateful. So when you translate the word kafir in the Arabic, in the English translation of the Quran, as someone who is ungrateful, where the context allows, the most important, of course, is the context, and in many cases it does allow it, then it becomes an inclusive translation of the Quran rather than exclusive. So it becomes a translation of the Quran that is that's for everybody, because I do believe that the Quran was revealed for all of humanity and not just specifically for Muslims. So the translation then has to be such that people from other faiths and other cultures and other traditions can understand it. So I felt that there was no inclusive translation of the Quran. That was one. Also, I feel that the Quran is universal. It's for all time. So when you do need translations of the Quran that have footnotes, that have commentary and so forth, but you also need a translation that doesn't have any excess baggage. It's just straight the translation. Because I wanted people to read the Quran and to be able to say, this is how I can identify with this. This is meaningful to me today. This is something that speaks to me today. Rather than going back to the history and when was this revealed and what battle was it or what situation was it. If it is eternal, which I believe that it is, and of course that's the Arabic of the Quran that's eternal, not a translation is just that. It's just in translation, interpretation. It's not the holy word. And the barakat or the blessings that you get from listening to the Arabic or reciting the Arabic is far different than the blessings that you get from reading the translation. But you cannot identify with something that you don't understand. And the Quran itself says to speak to people in their own language. Well, their language happens to be over here, happens to be English. So you need to use all English language, all English ideas. For instance, when the Quran talks about prophets, many of the translations use Musa and Isa, and then you meet Christians and they don't know who they are. But when you say Moses and Jesus, they say, oh, well, we know who they are. They're in our holy book too. And then you've made a connection with someone and you've brought them into your way of thinking and you're going into theirs. So it's a kind of human understanding that develops. So these were some of the reasons for why I felt a translation of the Quran was necessary. Another was, for instance, the word Quran means recitation. Therefore, the most important part of the Arabic of the Quran is to hear it recited. And when in English translation, they put it in paragraphs as if it looks similar to the Old Testament or the New Testament. In the first place, you've had to change the translation to do that because the Arabic continues on. It doesn't stop with the period at the end of a verse number. It continues on. So you've had to distort the translation. So in the translation that I did, there's no paragraphing, and you could listen to the Arabic recitation and read the English as you're going along and get the blessings from the Arabic, but understand the meaning as you're reading the English. So these are some of the different characteristics and qualities that I was looking for in a translation. And then, of course, the other major area was in chapter 4, verse 34, where the English translations have all said, husbands who fear disobedience on the part of their wives first admonish them, then abandon their sleeping places, then beat them. إِضْرَبُهُنَّ. So when I looked up the word daraba or idrab, and I understood it from the teachings that I had, it has 26 different meanings. So why are we choosing a meaning that's harmful to another human being? It just doesn't make sense, and it is not part of the Quranic message and the moral and legal principles of the Quran. Then I realized that, of course, as we Muslims all know, the Prophet never beat any of his wives, and we're all very proud of the fact that the Prophet never beat his wives. But what we don't recognize is that this is a command in the Quran. So we have to say the blessed Prophet, peace and the mercy of God be upon him, did not carry out a command of God. Now, what is more important, that the Prophet carry out a command of God or that he not beat women? Well, we've created a contradiction here, and we've diminished the Prophet in the eyes of other people. Whereas, what did the Prophet do when he had domestic unrest? He went away. And that's another word, that's another meaning of idrab, in the first form of the verb, which it appears that in this verse. So why can't we follow the sunnah of the Prophet and do as he did and understand it to mean to go away? And I was very happy to have found out quite recently that Ayatollah Makorem Shirazi has changed his translation on the internet. Of course, those books that were published a long time ago have to remain, whatever they were. But he has changed the translation on the internet, and at the end he says, Anhara tark konid, which means go away from them. So I was very happy to see that the clerics and the ayatollahs are beginning to become awake and aware to this situation. Now, what happened in the further research that I did, I found that in chapter 2, verse 231 of the Quran, it says, husbands who fear disobedience. It says, husbands who want to divorce their wives must do it honorably. They cannot harm their wife. And the word there is zarar. They cannot harm their wife. So I sat back and I thought about this, and I said, well, let me see. I know that Islam encourages marriage and Islam discourages divorce. But let me see what we've created here. What we've created, looking at it from a woman's point of view, is that a woman who agrees to a divorce cannot be harmed. But a woman who wants to stay married, a Muslim woman who wants to stay married, does so under the threat of being beaten. Well, this does not make sense, because this is making divorce sound a lot better in my eyes than staying married under the threat of being beaten. So we've created a contradiction by misinterpreting 434 that's not in the verse to begin with. And then in addition to that, in chapter verses 6 through 9, the Quran says that if a husband accuses his wife of anything and he is the only witness, she has a right to defend herself by swearing an oath 5 times that her husband is not sincere. But what happens in a real-life situation? The husband and wife have an argument. The husband accuses his wife, for instance, of flirting with another man, and then beats her, according to 434, because he has made himself both judge and jury. And the wife has not had a chance to take advantage of being able to defend herself. So this is, again, denying women rights that are given to them in the Quran by misinterpreting what the word idrabahunna means. So in this translation, I feel very blessed to be the first English translation that translates it to say, husbands who fear resistance, that is nushuz, resistance on the part of their wives, first admonish them, then abandon their sleeping places, then go away from them. Then when you talk to the jurists, they say, well, no, it can't be that, because idrab or daraba is a transitive verb and can only take a direct object. So when you say go away from them, you've made the object indirect and you've made the verb intransitive. So my response to them is, first of all, the blessed prophet who was unlettered, how come he understood it to mean go away? Did he sit back when the verse was revealed to him by God, from God, and say, I wonder, is this a transitive verb or intransitive? No, he understood it as the meaning of go away, and that is what he did. So I disagree with the fact that they say that this is the transitive or intransitive. And the second argument that the jurists use is that they say this verse 434 only relates to women who are nishuz. That is, husbands who fear nishuz on the part of their wives. And they translate that as being disobedient. So therefore, fine, that's what they want to say, it's wives who are nishuz. But then what happens when we get to chapter 4, verse 128, and it says wives who fear nishuz on the part of the husband? It's exactly the same word. Why are these two words translated differently? If it means disobedient in 434, then it has to mean disobedient in 4:128.
Quranic Code of Conduct. Do's and the don'ts in the Quran. The Holy Quran provides a recipe for salvation and redemption, as well as a comprehensive manual detailing how to lead a righteous life. The manual contains a detailed code of conduct, by which one can purify the self and attain nearness to God. It has been claimed by some that the Quran contains the broad guidelines of how believers should conduct themselves but does not detail the full Islamic code of conduct. They add that the latter can only be found in the Hadith and Sunnah of the Prophet. This video refutes this claim by presenting the comprehensive Quranic code of conduct, which covers all aspects of behavior. The Quranic code of conduct covers the relationship between the believer and his maker and the relationship between the believer and other humans. In this episode, we will cover obligations to God. Apart from a small number of instructions that were related specifically to the time of the revelation, such as the instructions related to some battles, or others that were addressed only to the Prophet or his wives, all the do's and do not do's in the list below are addressed to all people and for all times. The relevant Quranic verse numbers are accompanied for the reader's convenience. In this series we will focus on the Quranic code of conduct, and in this episode, we will discuss the do's and don'ts in terms of obligations to God. The do's. Number 1. Believe in the one God, His angels, His scripture, and His messengers. Surah 2 verse 285. Number 2. Worship God alone. Surah 17 verse 23. Number 3. Devote the religion purely to God alone. Surah 39 verse 11. Number 4. Strive in the cause of God. Surah 9 verse 20. Number 5. Remember God frequently. Surah 33 verse 41. Number 6. Put your trust in God. Surah 64 verse 13. Number 7. Fear no one but God. Surah 2 verse 150. Number 8. Love God the most. Surah 2 verse 165. Number 9. Repent to God and seek His forgiveness. Surah 11 verse 90. Number 10. Thank God and show gratitude. Surah 16 114 and Surah 14 verse 7. The don'ts. Number 1. Do not commit shirk. Associate anyone with God. Surah 4 verse 36. Number 2. Do not worship the devil. Surah 36 verse 60 to 61. Number 3. Do not love anyone as the love of God. Surah 2 verse 165. Number 4. Do not use God's name in vain nodes. Surah 2 verse 224. Number 5. Do not fabricate lies about God. Surah 6 verse 21. Number 6. Do not prohibit what God did not prohibit. Surah 16 verse 116 and Surah 66 verse 1. I am sure there are a lot more do's and don'ts that are not mentioned in this video. Can you think of any? If so, what are they? Comment below. I hope you liked this video. Please like, subscribe, and share. Peace and respect.
Assalamu alaikum, peace and respect to all of you. The purpose of today's video is to go through Surah 17 verse 46, Surah Al-Isra verse 46. Now, unfortunately, by some this verse has been misinterpreted, mistranslated, and the meanings changed. There's slight deviations in one of the words which has altered the meaning of this word in its entirety. Now, to help our understanding with this, we need to go through the Arabic, we need to have a look at the literal word by word translation, and we have to look at the different translations to understand the meaning
of the actual verse, what it's saying in its essence, in its true Arabic form. Also, you need to understand that Arabic which they speak nowadays is quite different to the Quranic Arabic, and God is very meticulous in terms of how He's rearranged each surah, how He's rearranged each verse, each word, each sentence. If God intended to write down Lord alone, He would have put Lord alone, or if He would have intended to write Quran alone, He would have put down Quran alone. There's no ambiguity in the Quran. If you've got a sincere heart, you're pure, you're clean from the inside, you want to learn, you want to find out the truth for yourself, then this is what you've got to take on board as well. You've got to understand, before we move along, that the Quran in Surah 39 verse 28, it mentions quite clearly this is an Arabic Quran without any crookedness, and we're going to focus on the Arabic to see where this word alone comes in this verse. You need to take into account Surah 12 verse 1, Alif Lam Ra, these are the signs of the clear book. You also need to take into account Surah 44 verse 58, we have made this Quran easy to understand in your own tongue so that you may be reminded. So what we're going to do, first of all, I'm going to play the recitation of the verse in Arabic of Surah 17 verse 46.
وَجَعَلْنَا عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ أَكِنَّةً أَن يَفْقَهُوهُ وَفِي آذَانِهِمْ وَقْرًا وَإِذَا ذَكَرْتَ رَبَّكَ فِي الْقُرْآنِ وَحْدَهُ وَلَّوْا عَلَى أَدْبَارِهِمْ نُفُورًا.
Alright, so that was the Arabic for Surah 17 verse 46. What I'm going to do now is show you some common translations from popular translators. So this is one from Marmaduke Pictou. Now here we're going to just focus on whether he's translated it as Lord alone or whether he's translated it as Quran alone, because that's the point of question in this video. So here, if we go down, he's mentioned, so makest mention of thy Lord alone in the Quran. Then it obviously goes on to say they turn their backs in aversion. Yusuf Ali, quite popular again in terms of people using his translation. Again, commemorate thy Lord and him alone in the Quran. Very important you understand this. And if you keep going down, again, Shakir, mention your Lord alone in the Quran. So those three instances of translations, they've mentioned Lord alone. But what we need to do is find out whether those translations are actually correct and what the meaning of those translations actually mean to me. If I was a non-Arabic speaker wanting to find what the true meanings of the Quran are, I would pick up a book, have a look at those translations, and to me and say, actually, when we read in the Quran, we need to mention the God alone, Allah alone, nobody else but God alone in the Quran. If we do that, the Quran itself has lots of verses, lots of surahs where other people other than God are mentioned. What do we do about all the messengers that are mentioned in the Quran, all the other prophets that are mentioned in the Quran? What do we do about the angels, ordinary people that are mentioned in the Quran? The Prophet himself is mentioned in the Quran. Now, do you see how these translations don't make sense? Because when we read the Quran, we'll have to mention the others by name, as messengers, as prophets, as angels. So that, to me, this translation, it's just common sense, it's just logical. From a logical point of view, these translations from, right from the word go, seem incorrect to me. Keep going down. If I keep going down, here's one from the monotheist group. So mention your Lord in the Quran alone. Now, obviously, there's contradiction now between that translation and the other three I've shown you above. To do the proper comparative study or to do a proper analysis of what the verse is saying, what I will have to do is go back to the Arabic form, because Remember, Surah 39 verse 28, an Arabic Quran without any crookedness. So if we go back to the Arabic, we will find out actually where this word alone comes. So, and incidentally, the word alone, wahdahu, appears in the Quran as a noun in masculine form 6 times, and I'll show you in the different surahs where that word appears. So if we go back to the Arabic here, now I know Arabic, so I know exactly where wahdahu is. It's here, wahdahu, al-Qurani, wahdahu. So that to me straight away suggests that the word wahdahu alone comes after the word Quran. If we look at the literal word by word meaning, and we have placed over their hearts coverings lest they understand it, and their ears deafness, and when you mention your Lord in the Quran alone, they turn their backs in aversion. If we look at the transliteration, if we go across here, al-Qurani wahdahu. Now just to double check the meaning of the word wahdahu, I've got a different website opened up here. This is Quran, corpusquran.com. By the way, this one here is Islam Awakened. This is from a brother. I really do recommend this website. Again, if I've not already mentioned, I'll mention it again. This for a comparative study, for a Quranic study, is really powerful. You can do word by word translations, you can do English translations, you can do a Quranic study group. It's really powerful. If I go to the Quranic Arabic corpus here, now in here, this is a different source now to this one, so you can't come back to me and say I've used the same source. I've used a different source here. So here for 17 verse 17, Surah 17 verse 46, if I go down, so when you mention your Lord in the Quran alone, so al-Qurani wahdahu, al-Qurani wahdahu. So we can clearly see that the word alone is after the word Quran. The word alone isn't straight after the word the Lord. It's after the word the Quran. Now we need to ask ourselves a question. Why did these translators translate that surah to move the word alone after the word Lord? That's a question you need to ask. Is it to incorporate other practices outside of the Quran? Is it to incorporate the Hadith and Sunnah, which is an external source other than Quran? Is it so they can promote their already established rituals from external sources which are not the Quran? I don't know. Okay, these are questions we need to be asking. We need to be researching. We need to use our eyesight. We need to be using our hearing to verify everything we see and hear with the Quran. If I go back to the Quran Arabic corpus, if we highlight on the word wahdahu, I'm going to show you the different instances of the word wahdahu in the Quran. Here 6 times, including Surah 17 verse 46. Incidentally, I've already checked, I've already researched this. In the other verses, the word alone comes straight after the word Lord. Surah 17 verse 46 is the only instance where literally the word alone comes after the word Quran, or al-Qurani in this instance. Okay, so that's something you need to bear in mind. You can see the Arabic here, wahdahu comes after the word Allah. In here, Surah 17 verse 46, wahdahu comes after the word al-Qurani. Here, word wahdahu, which is alone, comes after the word Allah. Here, Surah 40 verse 12, wahdahu comes after the word Allah, and this one same, this one the same. Okay, you need to ask yourself the question, why then did these translators, when they've translated these ones correctly, I've checked this in the correct form, alone in the correct place, why did they choose to translate this verse, Surah 17 verse 46, and put the word alone in the wrong place? And it goes back to the thing I was saying, to try and help promote their already existing practices using sources external to the Quran, maybe the rituals they already do for a number of years, to try and promote them Again, using sources external to the Quran, I don't know. Now, some questions you may be asked, or I've been asked, is, well, Arabic is quite difficult to understand. Arabic, normal Arabic, which they speak in this day and age, is quite different to the Quranic Arabic. Now, God has mentioned in the Quran that the Arabic Quran is without any crookedness. It's a clear book. It's easy to understand as long as you've got a clear conscience, as long as you're pure and clear and you're reading the Quran with sincerity. And I think that's one key bit you need to take into consideration. Okay, and some other questions you know people might ask is, in the Arabic language, is it possible to place words in various orders? You can, but again, God has taken into account the grammatical allowances in the Arabic language, so it's more obviously important and imperative then that God gives us a direct and simple meaning, which he has done in the 6 instances of the word wahdahu alone in the Quran. Quite clearly I've shown you where wahdahu is mentioned in the other verses and in Surah 17 verse 46 as well. It's really important to understand that. And it's also important that the arrangement of words, a slight deviation changes the entire meaning of a whole verse and the whole context of that verse, allowing people in this instance to use external sources other than the Quran for their own gain. And that's what I take from this video. It's really important to understand that. So to answer the original question, does it say Lord alone or does it say Quran alone? To me, based on the research I've done, what I've shown you today, it says Quran alone. Other translators do agree. Okay, unfortunately there are still those who have translated it as Lord alone for maybe their own gain, to use external sources, who knows, to try and promote the ritual practices which they've been doing for a number of years. I don't know. But I hope you've taken something away from this video. I would love to hear your views, your opinions, your comments. Please comment below. Let me know what you think. Do you think I'm on the wrong lines? Do you think I'm right? Do you think actually it's something to think about? Is it something you haven't thought about at all? Because this one word, wahdahu, has been moved by translators, which changes the whole context of that verse. And that's really important we get to the bottom of. Everything you've heard today in this video, you've seen today in this video, please verify for yourself with the Quran. Use the information, the tools you have in front of you, use the books you have in front of you. Please like, subscribe and share. Peace and respect. Peace, welcome, salam, welcome to another video. Today's video, what we're going to be doing is working or focusing on the word sunnah in the light of the Quran. So it's totally from the Quran, taking the Quran as the only source for religious guidance. So we're going to look at the word sunnah using the Quran. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. Let's move on. So the word sunnah then. So obviously traditionally many Muslims today have been brought up to believe that all Muslims should follow the Quran and the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad. What we need to ask is, we need to ask the question, why? Now obviously we're asking the question why, and the Quran is clear on the word sunnah and the usage of the word sunnah within the Quran itself. Let's find out what this word actually means. Now obviously the way the Arabic works by using root letters, or root words I should say. So root words are the Arabic letters that form the main part of a word. These root letters provide the basic meaning of a specific word. So the root letters are joined together with other letters to form different words with which have related meanings. So for example, in terms of sunnah here, the root letters which form a part of the word sunnah are seen, noon, noon, as you can see from the presentation here. So the meaning of these root letters or root words are to mean to clean, seize with the teeth, establish a law, follow a path, form, so on and so forth. Now, obviously, you can verify all this information with Lane's lexicon, because that's exactly what I've used. I've used volume form. You go on and find out the information by clicking on the page numbers there, and you can also find out by clicking on the link here as well. Okay, and that will take you directly to the online version of Lane's lexicon. Obviously, you've also got to keep in mind the context of what the verse is saying in the Quran, and also the context of the surrounding verses as well, to get to a definitive meaning for a specific word in the verse. So that is the root word of sunnah there. So the word sunnah then is used in the Quran many times, and it means the way of doing things, or a specific methodology or a method. So the Arabic word for sunnah is sunnat, obviously, and you can verify this by going to Surah 17 verse 77, Surah 33 verse 38, 33:62, so on and so forth. Okay, so it means in all those verses God's way, God's method. Okay, now we're going to focus on Surah 17 verse 77 as an example to help your understanding, or our understanding. So this is a closer look at 1777. So what I've done here to help everybody is I've used the Arabic, I've used the word by word, I've used the transliteration, and I've used probably one of the most popular English translations out there, Sahih International. So I'm going to read the English Sahih International translation out. So, established way for those we had sent before you of our messengers, and you will not find in our way any alteration. So what that verse specifically is speaking about, God's way is a constant. God's way over the duration of the course of the years has not changed. There's no alteration. There's no, that straight path, which is God's way, there is no deviation or alteration in God's way. The many messengers which God has sent down to us, they have followed God's way, and that way has been a constant. Okay, it has been the same way throughout. So it's the same consistent sunnah throughout, and it's God's sunnah. Nobody else's, God's sunnah. That's one thing we've got to keep in mind and keep in our heads. So another verse which I wanted to focus on is Surah 33 verse 62. So again, I put in the Arabic, I put in the transliteration, I put in the English translation there, which is the Sahih International, probably the most popular one you can get again. So the established way of Allah with those who passed on before, and you will not find in the way of Allah any change. So this is talking about the sunnah of God. So we can check the word sunnah, sunnata, the way of Allah with those who passed away before, and never you will find the way of Allah, sunnati, the way of Allah, any change. So basically, we read from this above verse, there is absolutely no alteration in the sunnah of God. And you can see the little spelling error there. It should be, there is no alteration, not there is not alteration. That is on me. I apologize about that one. So again, that's another example of a verse. You can verify this for yourself. The word sunnah is used in conjunction with the word God, and in God's sunnah there is no alteration. Okay, and that's exactly, that is the established way, the established method. Now I want to come back to that initial question, which many traditional Muslims use. You follow the Quran, follow the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad. There is absolutely no reference whatsoever to the Sunnah of the Prophet. Absolutely no. And we need to check, or you need to check, the following verses to verify this. Surah 3, verse 137, Surah 4, verse 26, so on and so forth. In all of those you will find no references or anywhere else in the Quran for the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad at all. So in summary then, we have established God's Sunnah, the only Sunnah, the way, the method. God is consistent and in the Quranic use of the word sunnah solely in conjunction with God, confirming God's sunnah is as the only valid sunnah, hence denouncing any beliefs in any other's sunnah as basically shirk. Yeah, if you follow somebody in association with God, you're not following God alone, you're committing shirk by default. Okay, so, and this means why the Quran never uses sunnah in connection with the Prophet Muhammad or any other messenger, because if God did, okay, automatically there's an association to follow Prophet Muhammad's sunnah as well as God's, or Prophet Muhammad's sunnah other than God's, automatically you're committing shirk. Okay, and the Quran is very obviously it's amazing in the way it's written, the linguistics of the Quran, and the use of sunnah is cleverly inserted in there. And in terms of the Quran, it's God's sunnah we're following, nobody else's. And this is again clarified in Surah 35 verse 43. I'll read it out to you again. I'll put the Arabic transliteration, the English Sahih International. Arrogance in the land and plotting of evil, but the evil plot does not encompass except its own people. Then do they await except the way of the former peoples, but you will never find the way of Allah any change, and you will never find the way of Allah any alterations. What this verse means, the following or the followers of the man-made sunnah, including Prophet Muhammad's sunnah, receive a stern warning in this specific verse, which uses the exact word sunnah to depict the moral penalty they deserve. So basically, follow somebody's sunnah except for God's, there will be a punishment there, because automatically you are committing shirk, to the point I was making earlier in this video. Okay, and I want to leave you thinking about the following. In Surah 35 verse 43 we've just read, the message is actually quite simple. If you play with fire, you will get burned through natural law in the same way as your predecessors. So you need to be very careful then. In terms of the word sunnah, are we following the Quran and Prophet Muhammad's sunnah? If we are, by default, you are committing shirk. Okay, obviously I've established in this video, the only sunnah you should be following, the only way, the only method is God's method, God's law. Because over the generations, that method has been the same. There has been absolutely no alteration to God's method, God's way, God's sunnah. And this has all been clarified in the Quran. I hope this video has helped. Please leave a comment below. If you have any other suggestions, any other usage of the word sunnah you found which I haven't been able to show you today or haven't clarified today, please comment below, and hopefully inshallah I'll be able to do another video based on that. Thank you ever so much. Peace. Salam.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
Some think that once you are a Muslim, if you decide to change your beliefs you are considered an apostate, an act punishable by death. The Quran clearly states there are those who believe then disbelieve, then believe again, then disbelieve again. This proves death for apostasy simply did not exist, because if it did, it would be impossible to believe again, after unbelief, as they would have been put to death after the first unbelief. In chapter 4 verse 137 we read, "Surely as for those who believe then disbelieve, again believe and again disbelieve, then increase in disbelief, God will not forgive them nor guide them in the right path." This is further proven by the following verse. In chapter 3 verse 86. "How can God guide a people who have rejected after believing, and they witnessed that the messenger is true, and the clarity had come to them? God does not guide the wicked people." The Quran states in no uncertain terms that there is no compulsion in religion. In chapter 2 verse 256. "Let there be no compulsion in religion, truth stands out clear from error. Whoever rejects evil and believes in God has grasped the most sure handhold that never breaks. And God is hearing, knowing." The Quran states that God could have made all those on earth believe, thus asks who is man to enforce such a thing if God did not. In chapter 10 verse 99. "And if your Lord had pleased, surely all those who are in the earth would have believed, all of them. Will you then force men till they become believers?" The Quran states there were those who believed part of the time, then disbelieved part of the time in order to confuse and sow discord amongst the believers of the time. If death for apostasy existed, no sane-minded person would attempt to do this, as they would be killed the very first time they tried it. In chapter 3 verse 72. "A section of the people of the book say, believe in the morning what is revealed to the believers, but reject it at the end of the day, perchance they may, themselves, turn back." Please also see the clear example set out in chapter 4 verse 88 to 91, in which the believers are told to offer peace with those who became hypocrites/apostates, i.e. were Muslim in name only but did not follow through with action during hostilities/fighting in this case, if they also offer peace. To conclude, it is clear that death for apostasy does not exist in the Quran. People are free to believe and live their lives accordingly or not. If a community or system or any structure deprives its members of this basic freedom, it will produce hypocrites and suppressed people who have no strength of belief or goals to work for, and will likely result in a weak system or community. Freedom of belief is the air that healthy and just communities breathe. In the Quran there is one example of Prophet Solomon who had workers make as he pleased, including statues or images. In chapter 34 verse 13 we read, "They made for Solomon what he desired of enclosures and statues/images, and pools of deep reservoirs and heavy pots. O family of David, work to show thanks. Only a few of my servants are appreciative." Thus, the Quran does not prohibit such things completely, it only prohibits being devoted to them or their worship. When Abraham said to his father and his people, what are these images/statues to which you are devoted? In chapter 21 verses 52 to 54 we read, "They said, we found our fathers worshipping them." He said, "Certainly you have been, both you and your fathers, in manifest error." To prevent such misuse, it is likely their use would be limited, but that does not mean forbidden completely. In chapter 7 verse 32 we read, "Say, who has forbidden the nice things that God has brought forth for his servants and the good provisions? Say, they are meant for those who believe during this worldly life, and they will be exclusive for them on the day of resurrection. It is such that we explain the revelations for those who know. For example, it is common knowledge that early Muslim rulers minted coins with images on them. In the early part of chapter 18 of the Quran it narrates a story about the people of the cave who were righteous, and had a dog, who slept close to them at the cave entrance. In chapter 18 verse 18 it reads, "You would think them awake, although they were asleep. And we turned them over to the right, and to the left, with their dog stretching its paws across the threshold. Had you looked at them, you would have turned away from them in flight, and been filled with fear of them." Furthermore, the Quran clearly states that believers are allowed to use trained hunting dogs and eat what they catch. In chapter 5 verse 4 it reads, "They ask you what was made lawful to them, say, all the good things have been made lawful for you, and what the trained dogs and birds catch, you teach them from what God teaches you. So, eat from what they have captured for you and mention God's name upon it, and be aware of God. God is quick in reckoning." However, in traditional narrations, attributed to Prophet Muhammad and his companions, but recorded by later generations, there is a mix of information about dogs, some positive, but most of it negative. However, there is no negativity about having a dog in the Quran. This is likely where the misconception results from.